We're often left with somebody else's idea of who we are, what we care about, what we need. And then they put something down and we're left to live with it while they're patting themselves on the back because they did a good thing. That's a savior mentality.
We start today in Manitoba, Canada, where there's still plenty of snow and where the Canadian government is investing millions of dollars in upgrading port facilities in the town of Churchill, and where the local First Nations community is making sure its voice is being heard.
Connected to the rest of the country by a single rail line stretching more than 1,000 kilometers south, and now on the radar for future development. The federal government's Major Projects Office is eyeing the Port of Churchill in their strategy to accelerate northern infrastructure and trade projects, with a plan to expand the port, rail, and construct an all-weather road to create a year-round Arctic trade corridor. Churchill has lived through waves of southern attention before. Now home to fewer than 900 people, a fraction of the population it once had during the height of military activity and booming port operations from the 1950s through the 1970s. So locals insist on leading the discussions around what happens here.
The amount of untouched land that we have here.
That's Kaylee Palmer, who is at one of the public town halls tied to the proposed expansion.
So I feel like they're the ones who should be saying what is done with the land. And, you know, we have a lot of elders here who really pass down their knowledge to us, and whether they're able to use their voice or not because of colonialism and also just the barrier of not all of them speaking English, you know, it's really important that the youth generation stands up for them and says what they need to say to make sure that the land and the animals here are protected.
And I could hear everybody.
Spend some time here and you'll quickly learn any story on a proposed expansion need be framed around connection and belonging. Many Indigenous families were forcibly relocated to Churchill for work tied to the port and rail line. They faced hardships and adversities.
They had dealings with the Hudson Bay Company. They traded furs with them in that area at York Factory at a little village called Gaskagamagan. Our mother and her brothers and sisters and our grandparents all grew up in that area. And then in 1957, the government decided that they would be relocated to a new reserve near that area, which they called York Landing. The rest of the people traveled to Churchill here for opportunities at the port because the port of Churchill had just been built.
For Verna Flett and her sister Georgina Berg, this meant leaving behind generations of life on the land and adapting to a new way of life shaped by outside decisions.
When I came to school, apparently I didn't speak any English. Now I could hardly speak my language anymore.
Yeah, we're just...
We're pretty fluent in English. Mind you, we could still speak our language, but like our growing up days in the flats, fish was plentiful. That was before the hydro diversion.
For the last 3 years, Berg has been rebuilding cultural connection through Cree language classes.
The kids have a land-based teacher here as well, and they take them out on the land to learn about, hunting. And so that is just all starting. In the last 5 years, it's gotten going, and which is really good because prior to that, there was no cultural teachings or...
The sisters say the history of York Factory is woven into their current conversations about land, development, displacement, and who benefits from northern projects. Reclaiming space is top of mind for artist Sandra Cook. She's witnessed firsthand development happening to Churchill instead of with Churchill. Even beautification projects can unintentionally exclude local Indigenous voices unless the community leads them.
Some really miss the mark, and we're left with this. And that's a long history of what happens here, is we're often left with somebody else's idea of who we are, what we care about, what we need. And then they put something down and we're left to live with it while they're patting themselves on the back because they did a good thing. That's a savior mentality.
By living through the ebbs and flows of projects past, Cook says the question isn't whether change is coming, it's who gets to shape it.
Right now, Churchill is on the cusp of some big growth. And if we don't find our voices and use our voices, things are going to be decided for us that are not necessarily in our best interest.
And there is hope. Today, the Indigenous voices rising up to be heard about the future of Churchill have something new behind them: ownership of the port itself.
For decades, the Port of Churchill was an economic engine, bringing seasonal jobs and rail traffic, shipping millions of tons of prairie grain through the western edge of the Hudson Bay. But by 2012, activity slowed, with changes in shipping economics, competition from southern ports, and costly infrastructure maintenance. Even at a local fishing derby, everyone has an opinion on the port.
The ripple from the hands that ownership has passed over the last years, it's really affected our economy. And it affected the core community of Churchill. So we never used to have a food bank in Churchill. We do now.
Town Councillor Heather Spence-Patello wants to see the feds breathe new life into the old port and responsibly consult community along the way.
The promises and the consultation process through environment studies, feasibility studies, a lot of funding has come through already. But in all honesty, the Churchill community is not going to sit back and just let whomever come in without, the proper consultation, the proper studies.
In 2016, American transportation company Omnitrax shut down major port operations, citing profitability concerns. 2017, another blow. A rail line washout, which cut off passenger and freight access to Churchill for 18 long months, disrupting supply chains, tourism, and the local economy. After that, in 2018, 41 Manitoba First Nations and Bayline communities came together in a $117 million purchase of the port and rail line, creating what is now the Indigenous-owned Arctic Gateway Group. Longtime Mayor Mike Spence sits on the Arctic Gateway Group board.
The infrastructure that we have, this is a lifeline. There's a tourism side to this as well. We're recognized as a tourism destination, not only for polar bears, beluga whales, northern lights. So that's why it's important that we find a balance to all of this, because we just can't, and we won't succeed on tourism alone.
This caught the attention of the provincial and federal governments, and they began to pour millions into the project, deepening the harbor, rebuilding the rail line, reinforcing bridges, and installing new cargo carrying systems. With climate change, each summer brings longer ice-free windows, and global interest in northern trade routes testing Arctic passageways not used before. But for residents like Maxwell Burke, this feels familiar. Decision-making taking place far away from the people most affected by the outcome.
As a people, as Northerners across the board, all of us have been conditioned, and I hope that this resonates across the North, that we have no say over what happens to us. That there is big decisions that are made elsewhere that dictate how your life is going to be, and you can fight against it, you can go along with it, you can do whatever you want. The result is going to be the same.
The future is no longer a distant conversation. It's unfolding here on the land, along the bay, and in the lives of all who call this place home. Charlotte Mort-Jacobs, APTN National News, Churchill, Manitoba.
A Kwakwaka'wakw First Nations housepost is going home. Since 1978, the cedar carving has been the property of the Association for Public Art in Philadelphia. It's on display at the Atelier Gallery until May 31st. Executive Director Charlotte Cohen.
We have professional art handlers that we work with, and they've been lovingly taking care of the work since it was deinstalled. And like any art object, it will be carefully wrapped, it will be cradled and transported across the country by truck, actually, and to Canada.
The piece was acquired for a bicentennial sculpture garden in Philadelphia. Deputy Director Laura Griffith.
It just was a fortuitous situation when a conservator from the National Museum of American Indian contacted us about the companion piece to the work that we have, that actually both of the works had been in their collection at one point, and our piece had then been deaccessioned from their collection and put on to the market how we acquired it. We were not aware of this. We had heard allusions that this might have happened, but we never had it confirmed. So once we learned that, then we were able to make contact with the appropriate community and start the conversation as to whether they were interested in having the work returned.
Located in Alert Bay, British Columbia, the Umista Cultural Center will welcome the artifact home. Juanita Johnson is its executive director.
It's a unique repatriation because they found us through someone we had been doing some work, a conservator we'd been doing some work with. It's usually not the way repatriations go. Usually we do the research, find the piece, and then start negotiating. But this was completely different. So it's a nice change. Umista Cultural Center, loosely translated, Umista means the return of something important. In earlier days, when people were taken captive by raiding parties, and when they were returned to their home, either through payment of ransom or a retaliatory raid, they were said to have umistad. So our old people felt like the return of our treasures was a form of umista. And so the basis of our collection is a repatriated collection. So we have a long and storied history with repatriation. There'll be a small welcome ceremony. And then just like really tiny for the day it gets here. Then after that, we'll have it installed in the first gallery, which is kind of where we have space for it. And that was sort of a deciding factor of, can we accept this?
For ICT, I'm Shirley Snavy.
Kind of take you guys in between the life of what it's like to be.
A lot of kids on the reservation don't have ways to express themselves in healthy ways. We're just helping with that, man. We're just doing what we can.
That's Nataanii Means, a musician and performer for whom doing all he can is a family tradition.
My mother, her name is Gloria Grant, and she's an educator, long-time educator, from teacher all the way to principal to superintendent, associate superintendent in Chinle, Arizona, which is the largest school district for Native students in the country.
And doing all he can is also reflected in even deeper traditions.
Hello, my name is Nataanii Means. I come from the Oglala Lakota, the Umaha, the Diné people. I'm also Ihanktawan Dakota.
And also newer traditions like hip-hop.
I'm trying to be the change that I want to be. I tell it like it is, man. I hope you understand me. Let's get a clap on, guys.
I took an interest in hip-hop because of its storytelling. It can be used to start a party. It can be used for all these different kind of mediums. It's not just one genre to me. Hip-hop has its own genres. And I use it to tell a story of where we come from as Indigenous people. Hip-hop can be used for social justice.
Social justice? It's in his lyrics and his blood.
My father was Russell Means. He was an Indigenous activist from the American Indian movement. Did a lot of work for the people, for the land, for Indigenous rights, Indian rights, who stood for the people, who fought all his life to defend and honor Indigenous rights via the treaties with the United States of America, broken treaties.
We caught up with Nataanii recently at a show in Colorado and learned of his efforts to help the next generations.
Yeah, so I've been doing a lot of youth work when it comes to helping shape different indigenous youth across Turtle Island. We do a lot of storytelling workshops where we bring in our equipment, our recording equipment, our film equipment, and we do a 4-day workshop where we teach them how to write songs, record them.
And maybe help spread a positive message about Indigenous communities.
People think we're either living in poverty, extreme poverty, dire straits, or we live in teepees, or the same stereotypes we hear all the time. And it's not like that. Yeah, we experience a lot of that stuff, but there's also a lot of beauty where we come from. And I have to get that out. We come from beauty, we come from strength, and that's what the world needs to know.
It's a message and work his parents passed down to him.
They always told us, go out and get an education, come back and help your people. So that's what it is,
In Carbondale, Colorado, for ICT, I'm Stuart Huntington.
Friendship, art, and the love for Native culture are being put to canvas and sneakers inside of Haskell's Cultural Center with its new exhibit. The display, created by best friends and Haskell students Aziza Smith and Ayana Tanyan, is titled From A to Z.
Her side is her side, my side is my side, but together it makes From A to Z, and my nickname's Z, so.
Cultural Center Director Travis Campbell has been trying to include more student-based art, but this exhibit in particular came from a not-so-serious conversation.
One day, he just kind of came in and jokingly was like, hey, you want to put some art up? And I was like, actually, if you really want me to, I can.
Ayana's part of the exhibit, titled Because of Love, is a love letter to all the things that guided and shaped her into who she is today.
A lot of my work that I've drawn that's displayed here, it's really about my community, where I'm from, my love of the land, my love of my family. So that's why I titled it, to me, Because of Love.
Aziza's, or the Z part of the display, has two sections, one with inkblot Rorschach-esque paintings and the other titled Res Girls, which is inspired by friends she knew on the reservation she grew up on in Wyoming before coming to Haskell.
I'm really proud that I lived on the reservation, and I love those girls in my life that I've depicted in those pictures.
Proud to paint and be a res girl, despite the negative undertone that it can be associated with.
Sometimes resi kind of can mean close to a word like ghetto or something. So yeah, some people don't like to be called resi, but I like being called resi.
Leaving behind a legacy means a lot.
Having it here displayed and kind of leaving my mark here on campus, because I graduated this semester, is a really big, impactful, meaningful thing to me.
For ICT News and Good Morning Indian Country, Caden Baird.
It was a packed house at the South Dakota Book Festival. Billy Mills was back in his home state with a new book for children, co-written by Donna Janelle Bowman and illustrated by S.D. Nelson, a citizen of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe. I asked him what the highlight of his trip was.
I think the highlight is just the opportunity as a Lakota to come back. And I met some young people yesterday and today that truly are taking our ancestors' comments of it'll take 7 generations to heal. And I met 7th generation Lakota youth who will take our culture, our traditions, our spirituality, along with their dream into the horizon of America to help correct the flaws and improve our democratic experiment.
The Olympic athlete is hopeful.
It's difficult to say what I'm going to, but it needs to be said. Our 3rd graders are far behind the average American in reading. And at the high school level, I have many, many schools telling me our high school students are way behind in reading. And yet, locked up within them is a resilience and a brilliance that needs to be heard. So just being able to play a little part with S.D. Nelson, Donna Janelle Bowman, with Wings of an Eagle, Gold Medal Dream of Billy Mills, I feel like as an elder, 87 years of age, that I can still make a difference. And I believe in our youth. It's not in ignorance. It's challenges they faced early in life. And we start correcting that. We've already seen our youth where they've corrected the reading concept and they caught up. And the brilliance and the resilience they bring to America.
From Lakota Oyate Homelands, I'm Shirley Snavy for ICT.
Maypop is the common name for the passion flower. I decided to keep the name Maypop Herb Shop, and then I just added Miss Ann's because it's my Maypop now, right? And in the South, you know, there's like Miss Ann, like you would be Miss Shirley. I almost called you Miss Shirley when I got online with you. But it's a form of respect, you know, and how folks address each other down here. So now it's Miss Ann's Maypop Herb Shop, and I feel like it's important that this place is, that the herb shop is run, owned, and operated by an Indigenous woman. I also work with doctors. We have doctors who send some of their patients down here, and we have specific formulas that we've worked with them for their patients. So folks will come in here and get the herbal formulas that their doctors sent them down here for. There is no place like New Orleans in the whole United States. I love the culture. It's sort of a bridge between the South and Caribbean cultures and South United States, Southern. It's very unique, and I felt like I could really fit in here. And I've been here for 14 years now. I raised my kids down here, and
The culture is really woven through all sorts of Indigenous peoples. Indigenous peoples there, you're right, from the Caribbean. And it's really a very interesting mishmash of cultures, I'd say.
it's a gumbo of cultures. That's how we say it down here. It's a gumbo of cultures, and really New Orleans, in the Indigenous language here, it's reviving the name of Bulbancha, which in Choctaw means land of many languages. This used to be a traditional sort of center of trading, right? Trading post.
And Whitehat was rewarded for her work with a Restoring Regenerative Agriculture grant.
It's an unrestricted grant, so I can use it for, I'm actually using the grant to help support my second year. I'm in a clinical herbalism program at the Vermont Center for Integrative Herbalism. And it's akin to medical school for herbalists. It's really very rigorous program. And so I get to use part of the award to support my education. You know, we're formulating equivalents to a lot of Western medicine, right? So that's where I was really first exposed to this, like, kind of apothecary and run by like brown people. You know, most of these places aren't accessible to us. If you go into our herb stores in Rapid City, they're really nice, but they're not accessible. And that's something that I'm always working towards, to make sure that our people have access, because we deserve access to good things, you know? We deserve access to the highest quality, sustainably harvested organic medicines that are really made in a respectful way and brewed for folks in a respectful way. So that's my goal, is to bring the medicines back home to South Dakota on this. So I'm started through this funding with the grant award, made my first trip back home with a project name, sort of a theme of my work, called Indigenous Herbalism on the Medicine Trail. You know, that's sort of the theme, to take my medicine on the road, meeting with Indigenous community members along the way, wherever my travels are, sharing medicine, and also learning and connecting with folks. So that's really, I'm like living my dream right now. I worked really hard to get here, so I'm really excited to be here. Because of our colonization, we lost we lost that direct connection with our herbal remedies and those pathways for sharing that, right? Because of our boarding school experiences and the fact that the American Indian Religious Freedom Act hadn't even been passed till the 1970s, right? So a lot of this knowledge was almost it was like really underground still, and folks still had a little bit of a resistance, or not a resistance, but I would say just a little bit of, you know, they were just not really afraid, but they just didn't really know how to work with the plants, a very, very cautious approach to plants. And so we would do these herb walks, and it was so awesome with the community members and relatives back home, and folks coming out and saying, I remember my grandma used to work with this, and she called it this, and this is how they worked with it. Or my auntie's favorite plant was this. So the knowledge is there and coming back.
It's getting warmer out, the days are getting longer, and I'm looking forward to gardening. For a beginner, what would you say I should put in my herb garden?
I would say to put in your basic culinary kitchen herbs. They are so medicinal. Grow your sage, you know, your culinary sage, and your thyme. Thyme is an amazing kitchen medicine, okay? Grow your thyme, your oregano, your rosemary. Like those are just a few right there that have very beneficial medicinal qualities to them. Yes. Thyme especially is one that is really effective. Antibacterial, antiviral. There's a lot of medicinal qualities to them. You can use them in your teas.
For ICT, I'm Shirley Snavy.